Hi everybody, welcome to this session. This session is called Hidden Gems of RDi. I've been using RDi for several years now, many years in fact, and it still amazes me how many different gems or little tricks are buried in the product and not necessarily easily found, or you might stumble onto them, but they're not so much mentioned in the documentation. So what I've done is I've compiled a little list here of little tricks, hidden gems that you might find useful in your day-to-day application programming. Let's get started so you can see what I'm talking about. I like to have all my sessions begin with a menu so you can see what we're going to talk about. Now, there are hidden gems everywhere in RDi. They're all over the place. So I'm not going to focus just on the RS or even just in LPEX, but as you can see from the menu here, I have RSE covered. I have LPEX, which is the editor, of course. Even some debugging and some outside products, one thing called iSphere. There are things in iSphere which I'm going to demonstrate, or at least talk about. You should know about these different features that really extend the use of RDi. There are many things that RDi can do that you may not be aware of. So with that, again, let's get started. Let's move on. So the first thing I have here on the screen is resequencing filters. I'm going to now open up my live RDi so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And here it is over here. You see that I have an open connection here called Hidden Gems, and I have that little green arrow, which means that the connection has already been established. It's open. This is connected to IBMI. Before I go and start resequencing filters, here's one more little trick I'll show you. Let's say I want to copy this connection. Now, why would I want to copy a connection? Well, a couple of reasons. Each connection that you have here defined in RDi, I always say, basically, you should equate this in your mind to a session. That's basically what it is. It's an IBMI access session. Now, why would you have multiple sessions? That's easy, because if you have session ABC, you certainly may want ABC to have different user IDs associated with them, or different library lists, or things like that. That's why you'd have different sessions. And of course, within RDi, I can have multiple sessions to the same partition, the same system, or I can have sessions spread across many systems. That's the nice thing about RDi. You need one copy, one license, and because it's licensed to me as the developer, I can have many connections and work across the board. Especially if you're a consultant like me, it works out perfectly. But so here's my hidden gems over here. I want to create a duplicate. I want to create a copy of this. Well, if I just come down here and say copy, you'll notice that I get this screen that says copy resource, and it's asking me now which profile I want to copy this into. Basically what this profile is when you first set up RDi, the entire product is set up across in your profile. This really doesn't, the profile is my license, or my copy of RDi. I'll always have the same profile. If you're working in a networked environment or a group environment, the profile will take on more meaning. But for now, profile is just me. But I'll say OK, just like this. Here it is OK. And of course, now it's saying I have a duplicate name collision because it's attempting to write that name to the same profile, and it already exists. That's why it's saying, do I want to override it, or do I want to rename it? And here I'll say rename. And now I can just come over here and give my new connection name. I'll say Hidden Gems 2 just because it's easy, Hidden Gems 2. And that should have immediately created Hidden Gems 2. There it is over here. Now what I find interesting is that when you create a new connection, when you copy a connection rather, the filters don't get copied, which I find curious. But be that as it may. So the filters themselves don't get copied. Well, I can come over here and just highlight all of these filters over here, and I can right click again and say copy, and now I get that same message. It's saying, what filtered pool do you want to copy in here? Now this is kind of curious because when you first create a new connection like this and you're trying to copy filters, you'll notice that the new connection name here, Hidden Gems 2, is not listed in here. Now why is that? That's because because this is a copied connection, RDi has not yet allocated a space, or what they're calling a filter pool. It has not created it yet for this filter. So the workaround for this, if you want to go this route, the workaround is you need to actually create at least one filter. You can call it anything you want, but just you need to basically satisfy the filter pool requirement. So I'm just going to create one that says CL source and devlib rather. Now if I go to copy, just like this, copy, and I expand that, now you'll see that Hidden Gems 2 is listed there because again now it sees the filter pool. I'll say OK, and there they are. They're all listed there now, so that works out great. So there they are. I quickly was able to create a new connection and copy the filters in. Now of course the quote-unquote longer way is I could actually export these to a little config file and then import them into RDi. I do that quite often as well. But if you if you want to copy into the same exact workspace as I did right here, I find that copying and pasting is a quicker way to do it. But the export and import will work just as well, just so you know. Now getting back to this screen over here that says resequencing. Well, the first thing I notice here is these filters here are really out of order, as you can see over here. So RDi does give you a nice feature here where you can sort. You can select things in a tree here and sort them. So you see I have devlib over here. I'm going to come all the way down to where it says update program. And now I'm going to right click over here and just click on sort. And you'll notice now that they are now sorted in a different sequence as they are from the original connection. There's Hidden Gems, and there are my filters. I come over here, and now they're in the proper sorted sequence. Of course, the fix is lowercase, so it's higher. It's a higher value, so it drops to the bottom of the list. Now that's interesting, but let's get back to resequencing. In the old version of RDi, or really Eclipse, in older versions, if I wanted to move this fix program, even though it's lowercase, let's say I wanted to move it up to a higher place in this tree over here, in this list of filters, I'd have to right click over here, and I would have to move them up one at a time, just like this. Move, and I could say move up, move down, and it's very cumbersome, especially when you have a long list of filters, 20 filters. Moving one at a time, each filter can become quite annoying. So what they've done is they've added a couple of releases ago in RDi. I can take any filter right here and just literally just drag it up to wherever I want it. So I want to drag it up to after the letter D, even though it's lowercase. I'll put it right in there, and just like that, I now have it in the proper sequence where I really want it. So that's the first little hidden gem. Well, actually, there's a lot of hidden gems. The hidden gem is I can copy a connection, copy the filters, I can sort them, and already I can resequence them. So I've already shown a couple of different tips over here. Another feature that I like, oops, let me actually log on to this connection. Let me connect it now. That would help. So let me log in. I'm typing my password now. I should get a green arrow, which I did, which means I now have that connection open or active. So as I now open up all these different filters, as you can see over here, I have all these different filters open, and even down here, a different connection over here, I have other connections open, and I have other filters open within those connections as well. So here's another connection over here. All right. Now, I happen to recommend a lot of filters. You should use a lot of filters. It helps you subset your code, subset your source physical files, and it gives you a quick access to navigate in your system. The problem with this is that it gets difficult, potentially difficult, to navigate up and down. Now, I like to have a very neat tree over here, an RSC tree. So what I don't like to do though is if I want to shut everything down, if I don't want to have everything open like this, one quick way is I can just come here and click on any member, and I'm just hitting now the back arrow, not the backspace, but the back arrow key. When I click on back arrow like that, what it does is it just goes to the next higher tier in the tree. So it jumped from that member name to the filter name itself. If I click on the back arrow, if I click on the back arrow key again, I'll do that right now, it will collapse that filter. So very quickly, it gives me a way to start collapsing this entire tree just like that, which I just did over here. And you can see I'm just doing it over here in the bottom again. Now, of course, if you really like, if you want to collapse the entire tree, you can click on this button right over here, collapse the entire tree, and that will give you everything. That's really a final step. You may want to do that. You may want to do that right before you log off. There's actually a preference in RDi, which I'm not going to show you now. There's a preference that will actually always collapse the tree right before you sign off. That is a preference you can look up. That came out, I think about a year or two ago. But you can see what I like using the back arrow key because it gives me more control over which objects I actually want to collapse one at a time. So that's another tip right there, another little hidden gem that's built into RDi. Moving forward, there's this great view on the RSE called the Remote Scratch Pad. Let me show you what the Remote Scratch Pad is because it's really very helpful. It's over here in the bottom. It's hidden all the time, and I'm willing to bet more often than not that people just kind of ignore it and don't really know exactly what it does. Let me show you what this does. Just for simplicity's sakes and to improve the visibility over here, I'm going to take it from its original spot and I'm going to put it over here. Now here is my remote scratch pad. You can see I've already been playing with it over here. I have some entries over here. What this basically is this. The remote scratch pad, what it does is it allows me to add things to basically subset my tree over here so I don't have to keep navigating up and down. What that basically means is if I know today or right now in my morning development session, I'm going to be working with different things from different connections. For what I mean by that is here's my hidden gems connection, which is already open over here. And I know for a fact that I'm going to be using members from this filter over here, QRPG LE source. I can take this filter and literally drag it right to my remote scratch pad just like that. Now you notice that it puts the connection name there. Before I actually brought this up, I had already populated this window over here with a different connection over here. But what this lets me do is it lets me move different things over into view over here without having to navigate up and down this tree anymore. By taking the key objects that I want, I'm putting them over here. Basically, it lets me subset my tree over here, which is an absolutely great thing because then I don't have to keep coming up and down over here, navigating up and down this tree over here. It's a very quick way for me to have access to this tree. All right, while I'm doing that, let me keep moving over here. Let's go over here, open up my library list. There's my library list. Let's say I want to, for example, have RDi user. For whatever reason, I can drag that over here as well. And now you notice I have three different connections over here. Again, these are actually working. These are working objects over here. I can just come here and this is a filter right here. I can do whatever I want. The point is now I have a subsetted list. Now that's remote scratch pad. If I highlight this and remove it just like this, if I close it out, it just removes it from the remote scratch pad. It's not going to actually delete it, it just removes it from view over here. Now what's nice about this, because it is a scratch pad, when I log off of RDi, when I close this RDi connection and actually get out of RDi entirely, the scratch pad will be cleared. It's just that, it's a scratch pad. I can delete them one at a time or remove them, or I can click on X and they'll go away, just like that. That's remote scratch pad. It's a quick way to subset this tree over here. I'll put it back over here, where it was, and we'll keep going. Okay, so the next hidden gem is in the application diagram. Now, as a consultant, if I go to an account that I'm not familiar with, and I'm looking at a brand new program or application, one of the things I might do is I might create an application diagram of the program. Basically, it gives me a high-level view of what's going on in the code, and it's a tool to help me better understand, or to more quickly understand, what's going on in the program. Let's see how this works. So I'm going to bring up RDi. I'll do that in a minute. Here's RDi coming up. Here it is. And the way you bring up an application diagram is very simple. You simply take any member you want and you right-click on it, and right at the bottom it says application diagram. I'll click it, and what RDi is going to do right now is it examines the source, and it's going to produce this flowchart. Like I said, I'll double-click over here, and in this particular example, you can see that I have this program. This happens to be a service program called ENC Decrypt, which I use during my debugging sessions quite often. And here is a procedure right here called secret data. And here I also have a couple of subroutines. And you can see that it's showing me that I'm referencing these external APIs. These happen to be encryption APIs, but it doesn't make a difference. They're outside of the program module itself. If I click on or double click on any one of these entries here, so here it says subroutine encrypt routine, I'll double click on that, and what it's going to do is immediately open up the source member, which it just did, and it will position me right there. Alright, so that's kind of interesting, I suppose, and it is helpful. But the real hidden gem here is that you can create an application diagram for more than one program at the same time. Now, why might you want to do that? Well, again, if you have more than one program that they call each other, and I have that example right here. I have this program called ENC Debug, and this guy right here, the service program. I'll hold the control key down and click on that. Now I have two members selected, and in fact, I'll come down here and click on that member as well, because that one happens to reference that same encrypt routine. Right-click again, application diagram. Now this time it's going to analyze 3 program members at one time. So it's going to take a little bit longer to produce that flow chart, as I just showed you, or the interaction of the programs. But now it's just finished. You can see that. I'll double click over here to make it bigger. And because I have multiple programs listed here, these nodes are summarized over here, but certainly I can click on that plus sign right there, and that will open it up just like that. And you'll see how they all interact with each other. So this program here, ENC Debug, is referencing it's referencing the procedure that happens to be over here, ENC Decrypt over here. There it is over here. Here's my other program, zcontrig, and I can just open up these nodes over here. And just to give myself more room, I'm going to hide this palette. The palette lets you navigate within the application diagram. I'm going to hide it to give myself a little more room. And again, you get to see really how all these things relate to each other. There is a zoom feature over here. I can make this larger and smaller if I want, maybe to give myself more screen size and to see more of the diagram at one time. But for now, I'll leave it at 100% just so you can get a flavor of what's going on over here. So I find this very helpful. And does it help you debug programs? Not necessarily. It might help you figure something out that wasn't so obvious. But again, I typically use this when I first go into code, and it gives me a chance to really get a high-level view. So the hidden gem here is that you can do multiple source members at one time, which can be quite valuable. I'll close this. I'll say save no, and I'm back over here. Back to the presentation. And double click with what? To open or to do what? So what is that talking about here? Here's another hidden gem. The hidden gem here is if I just double click on any member, as I'll do right now, double click, the default is to have that automatically open up in edit mode. That's the default when RDi comes right out of the box, edit mode. But a lot of developers don't like to have things open up in edit mode. They don't want to lock their members, and more often than not, they're simply browsing. Especially if you're selecting multiple members at one time, you don't want to have them all open at one time. Well, about a year ago, a very nice preference came out that allows us to dictate control of how things are going to be opened. Are they going to be opened up with edit mode or with browse? And the way you do that very simply is you go to preferences, and here's the tree right here. You click on Windows, here's Live RDi, Window, you go to Preferences, as you can see over here, and basically just follow it along. Windows, Preferences, and I have the word Type Objects, which I'll do over here, Objects, right there. And, whoops, Objects, right? And then you click on Remote Systems, I have that over here, Object Subsystem rather, Object Subsystem over here, there it is. And it's right here, Open Source in Browse Mode. Now the default for RDi is to not have this box checked, which means if you double click, it's going to open up in edit mode. But if you follow this and you double click on, if you add a check rather to this box right here and you say OK, when you come back to this screen of RDi right here, if you just double click, it will open up in browse mode, which is kind of nice. So that's another little hidden gem there. Another hidden gem that just came out in RDi is this brand new feature, which I'll come over here. So let's say I'm already in edit mode, and I didn't intend to get out to be in edit mode. Well, I can close this and then open it again in browse mode. But literally in the last update of RDi 9.6.2, this new feature came out where I can say Source, Toggle, Edit, and Browse mode. And what that will do, I'll click on it right now, or I can press Control-Shift-G as a shortcut. But if I click on Toggle, Edit, Browse mode, just like that, what it does is you can see what it says right here, setting editor to browse mode, and now I'm in browse mode. I can no longer edit this member. And I can do it again, edit back to edit mode. And now I'm back to notice the word browse went away, and now I'm in edit mode. Now if I come here, of course, if I happen to change a value now that I am in edit mode, and if I come back here and say switch back to browse mode, well, it can't just do that without first giving me a chance to save the modified source member. So so you're protected in that regard. I don't want to save it, so I'm good to go. Anyway, now you get the idea of how this works. It's a nice little feature, and let's move on with the presentation. Source compare with merging. All right, I'm going to close this altogether, close that. Now I have members here called Source 1 and Source 2. Now they're fairly comparable to each other. Now think of the green screen. Think of PDM. When you're in option 54, which is the old compare, and when you get the report, when you compare members to each other, what do you get? Do you get a nice side-by-side comparison? No, you get these letters I and D's. These three lines were inserted. These were deleted. ID, ID. And if you have a very long program, you have these blocks of these I's and D's, but it's not very helpful when you're trying to figure out what changes are in the program. What RDi lets you do? This is a common mistake. I hear this quite often. You can right-click over here, and it says compare with. Now, many people tell me that there must be a problem with RDi because this is always grayed out. The reason why it's grayed out is because you're trying to use this like PDM, where you type in 54 and then hit enter, and then you prompt it for the next member. That's not the case here. If you want to compare two different members, you must select them at the same time. So I'm going to hold the control key down and click on it. I just did that now. Now I will right click and I'll say compare with again. And now each other is not grayed out. I'll click on that, and it's comparing them right now, and it just finished. And now I have this nice compare view, which I'll open up over here, and you'll see that it has a couple things happening here. I can scroll up and down, And again, these are mostly the same, but where they are in fact different, I get these lines over here, which is kind of interesting. So it's telling me what's different in these two programs. Also, I have these boxes over here. These boxes will navigate to the next change, so I don't have to keep scrolling up and down. That's another nice feature. And then I have here, I can go to the next difference or the next change, or the previous change, next difference. That's the next line. Or the next change will actually show me on the line what's different. So here I have an 8 and here I have a 6. So that's also interesting. Now, what I've just shown you has always been in RDi. The hidden gem here is that if you've been disregarding this for this reason, that you can't do much more than that, don't, because now there's a new feature which just came out in RDi, and now I can literally copy all from left to right, copy all non-conflicting left and right. I can go back and forth. I can switch to left and right view, as I just did. I can, again, copy all the non-conflicting lines from the left to the right. Again, I'll do that right now. And this now has all of the changes that were put in here, just like that. And now that I've modified this, it's saying, do you want to save your changes? No, I don't want to save my changes. But that's what I can do. It lets me move things back and forth to live members. So that the ability to compare and merge is very helpful, and I think it's worth a second look. If you've been using it and only been comparing and not using the new merge feature, you're not getting the full use of RDi. Okay, let's move on to the next section of our presentation here, which is the LPEX editor. Just like the RSE, there are many, many, many things you can do with an LPEX. But one of the ones that is truly a hidden gem is the compare feature. Now, what am I talking about? I'm going to open up RDi again. Let me bring up RDi so you can see it. Give me one moment while I open it up. Here's RDi. And I'm going to open up this member over here. And I'll click on it here to make it larger. So here's the question. How many times have you been in, let's say, Microsoft Word or Excel or even PowerPoint or anything else, and you're just browsing through the different slides or the different columns and rows in the Excel, and then you click on the X at the top right to close it. And what do you get? You get a window that pops up and says, do you want to save your changes? And now you're sitting there scratching your head saying, what changes? I didn't make any changes at all. So now we have a problem. Well, the first thing RDi does is, I'm in this member right here, just for kicks. If I were to change anything, literally, right now I have what's called a clean editor. And a clean editor simply means that the member that I'm looking at on my screen is the same as what's on the disk. They're in sync, they're clean. The moment I change anything here, so I'll just come over here, and even this comment, if I just put some X's over here, you'll notice that right here I now have an asterisk, and that means that I now have what's called a dirty editor. And a dirty editor implies that what I have on my screen no longer matches what I have on the disk. So I'm going to continue coming down here, and I'm going to just change a couple of different things here, different lines of code. I might even remove these two comments over here. I'll do that using the SEUDD command. I'll come here and I'll actually insert a line. I'll do RP. I'll say X equals %sub. Just for kicks, I'll throw in a different new line of code here. Here's an array name. I'll say array name, and here I'll put a letter number 1 and a semicolon here, and I'm good to go. All right, and I'll just do one more thing. I'll just change a couple more lines of code over here. So instead of setadmin, I'll type some extra letters over there. You get the idea. So once again, I already know I have a dirty editor, and if I go to close this, it's going to say, hey, it's been modified. Do you want to change it? Save your changes. I'll cancel out of here, but wouldn't it be nice if I can say to RDi, or it's really to LPEX, please show me what I changed. Yes, I know I changed some lines, but what did I actually change? Well, LPEX, the LPEX editor, does have a command line, and it's on the bottom. I'm going to press the escape key right now, and by pressing the escape key, that will bring the cursor down, or the mouse down to the bottom, which is over here. Here's the command line right over here. So these commands that I can type in over here, this is not the same as F21 in SCU. In SCU, by pressing F21, that will bring up an actual command prompt, and I can type in IBMI batch commands. That's not what this is. This command line allows me to type in LPEX commands, commands that are directives to the LPEX editor. So the one I want to show you, the real hidden gem here is the compare. So watch what happens. I type in the word compare. When I hit enter, it's going to now compare the current version that I have open to what's on the disk. It just did that, which is almost like a snapshot of when I first opened it. It takes a snapshot of it, so it knows how it looked before. And what I have here now in living color, so I've already shown you the source compare, which is a side-by-side. This is another way to compare your source member. And what I have is a special now this view. And the way this works is whatever is in red is what used to be in the member, and what's now in yellow is the current version of that line. So you can see perfectly here that I had the words the following data structures over here. That was what was before, and then I came along and I changed those letters to letter X's. So that's what's over here. It's important to know that if I were to save this member right now as it is, it will not save both of these lines. The red line is strictly a visual thing. It's not a part of the member. That's important to know. Now, because I am in this now new compare mode, when I right click over here, I now have another option, or a new option in this menu. I right clicked in here and got this compare. And now I can click to the next mismatch if I want. I can come over here and I can come over here and say next mismatch, or I can press Control-Shift-N. Either one will work. So if I go to Control-Shift-N, just like that, do it again, compare, Control-Shift-N, I'm brought to the next one, as you can see. And here, what did I change? Well, I changed, here's the original clear data, and I typed over these characters over here. And I can just come over here and just keep pressing Control-Shift-N, as I'm doing right now. And here's a perfect example right here where, in this case, there is no corresponding yellow. That's because these are the two lines that I deleted. So it's saying to me here that these were here, and now they're no longer here. So these were deleted. Again, if I were to save the member right now, these would not get saved in there. They're gone. But it's just a visual thing. Control-Shift-N again. Here's another perfect example. There is no red. There's only a yellow. Why? Because in this case, I added this line. So there was no old line. So it's only yellow. Those are the lines that I added. So you can really see the value of this. It's really extremely powerful. And of course I can go back to my previous match. I can ignore my sequence numbers if I want, ignore your comments. And of course you can also say print mismatches, and this will actually produce a document that you can even create as a PDF, for example, and it will show you just the changes. And I can absolutely assure you that this is far better than option 54, where you get the I's and the D's. You will get meaningful information. So this compare is a phenomenal way to look at what you've done. Now I'm in this compare mode. How do I get out of this compare mode? Well, I'll go back to the command line by pressing escape. There it is. I'm on the command line again. Now I type in the words compare clear. And when I do that, compare space clear, notice that the yellow has gone over here. If I right click to bring my menu up again, notice that the compare option is now out of the menu, so it's gone. So that's compare, and really a true hidden gem that has saved me so many times. Extremely powerful, one that I recommend you use. Learn how to use it. As you can see, it's very simple to use, and I promise you, you'll be getting a lot of value out of this one. Okay, another hidden gem of LPEX is something called highlighting or marking. This is something that I find helpful from time to time. Let me show you what this little gem is all about. Let me switch to RDi again so we can get an idea what's going on. There's my same member. I'm going to double click to open that up again. Give it a chance to download. There it is. Expand on that. And I'll just go to, I don't know, I'll go somewhere in the line to find a field that I may want to search for and show you what I'm talking about. So here's the guy right here. Here's a perfect example right here. I have this field called N underscore, as you can see, C3UDI. Now, this field I happen to know is used in several places in the program. Now, certainly, I can double click on this, just like that, and I can come over here, and I can press Control F to find, just like that, and I can type in the field name here, just like that, C3UDI, and there it is. And I just, Control F again, and I can click on all, and all of the instances, and there are 53 of them, as you can see, 53, they're all shown at one shot, which is very helpful. The problem with this, if you want to call it a problem, is that I'm not seeing it within context. All I have here is the different lines, which again, this by itself is very, very helpful. But would it be helpful in a different way, perhaps, if I can actually see this field where it lives in the code? Well, that might be helpful. So I'm going to now press Control W. Control W will get rid of that, will re-expand, get rid of the compression of the source member lines. Now I'm going to come back over to any one of these instances right here and double click on it again. So double clicking on it will highlight it, as I just did. So now I have my field selected. That's good. Now I want to highlight that. What that means is I want RDi to pretend as if I literally had a yellow highlighter, and I can highlight on my screen the different locations where it is. So you select the field like this. It's double clicked. I selected it right just like this. And I come to the top menu over here, and you see when I hover over this, it says this will toggle the marking occurrences of the given entity. Well, the given entity is this field name over here. Click on toggle it to select it. And what it just did was it now just highlighted every instance of that entity or this field name. And if I just start scrolling down, wherever that field is in the program, it's going to appear highlighted. And you can see there it is over here. And I know it's there it is again. So it just gives me a quick way to make that stand out. Now, also on the right side of here, I have these yellow boxes. And these yellow boxes, I can click on them over here, and that will always bring me to the next, as you can see over here, the next place where it's highlighted. And obviously, if that was scattered throughout the entire program, I would have more yellow boxes over here. But I don't. In this particular case, it's kind of isolated to this one section over here. But at least now I can see this field in its natural habitat, if you will. I get to see how it actually is being used, the context, and this it gives me perhaps more meaning to my search and the proper use of that field. So again, I can find it and click on all, and that will give me every instance of that field, but it will only give me the single lines, where in this case highlighting will give me all of the source code, not abbreviated, and it will highlight. Now it did say entity, because that's not just for a field. Anything I highlight, it will find that. So if I'm looking for an opcode or whatever the case is, anything I highlight, it will find it, given that once I select it. And you just toggle it on and off like this, toggle, I untoggle it, and it goes back to being normal. So that's highlighting. Again, I call this another hidden gem, something you may want to play with. As I said at the start of this presentation, there are many hidden gems. Some do exist in the RSE, some exist in the LPEX editor, and some actually exist in the debugger. Let me show you one that I think might be very helpful to you. So I'll move the slides over now so you can get a better idea what's going on. All right, so let me bring up RDi. Here's RDi, and here is a source filter. You can see it right here. Here's my source filter, and I have this one program called ENC Debug. As you can see, I'm going to right click over here and come down here to where it says debug or code coverage service entry point. I want to set a service entry point for this program. What that tells the system, that tells the debug server that's active on IBMI, the debug server, that the next time this program, ENC Debug, runs out of this library, encrypt, by this user ID, which is my ID, I'll click OK. I want you, RDi, to go into debug mode and let me debug that program the next time automatically. I'll say OK. And of course right here, here's my new view that opened up over here. And you can see there's the library again, the program name, user ID, etc. Now I'm going to bring up a green screen. I'm going to log in, add library list entry encrypt, just like that. I'm on as my same user ID as RDi is requesting. Now I'm going to type in the call ENC debug and hit enter. And what's happening right now is RDi just switched to the debug perspective. That program is now in event wait. You can see it sitting there. And here's RDi. I can now just start pressing F6. I can debug this program and no problem. Normal. I'll press F8 so I can get out all the way. Here's F8, program terminated. Here's the complaint that some people have about this. The complaint is as follows. Especially in the world of web services, where you have a lot of different calls to the same program. The problem is this. The problem is that you may not necessarily want to go into debug mode every single time the program gets called. Even if it's an interactive program, again, you may not want to always go into debug mode. Maybe I would like to get prompted first by RDi and give me the chance to decide at runtime if I want to bring up the debugger or not. All right, so I'm going back into RDi. There's a preference to do this. Window, Preferences. You'll type in the word debug, which I did already, and then you want to go to IBM iDebug, which is where I just was. IBM iDebug, and that's the screen right here. On the screen, there is a checkbox that is not checked. When you first open up RDi right out of the box, without changing anything, this box will be unchecked. However, if I come here and I click this box, look what it says. Prompt when service entry point is encountered. I'll click OK. So that's telling RDi if all of these conditions get met, library, program name, user ID, if they get met, don't go directly into debug mode, but instead give me the chance to bypass it. So I'll bring up a green screen again. Here's my green screen. Call ENC debug. I'll hit enter. I just did. I'll bring up RDi again. Here it is. Now, normally I would go into debug mode, but that's not the case now. Now I have this new prompt, and you can see exactly what it says. I've encountered this program, this library, by this user ID, and there's the job number, job name. Do you want to start a debug session, yes or no? And if I say no, what will happen is it will not go into debug mode and the program will run to completion. In this case, that particular program will just run and go back to the menu. So I'm going to click no, do not go into debug mode. Bring up my green screen again. And as expected, the program is now gone. The command is off the menu because the program ran to completion and now we're done. So that's a nice way, if you're debugging a lot of interactive jobs, to be selective about which ones you want to go into debug mode for. Again, another one of those hidden gems, something that you might find very useful in your development effort. The next gem that I want to show you is also in the debugger, and it's the ability to debug more than one program at one time, more than one job, in fact. So watch what I can do here. I'm bringing up RDi again. Now I have an object filter open over here. This object filter contains program objects, and these happen to be in library encrypt, which is fine. There it is. And there's that same program, enc debug, but now you see the PGM. This is the object. So I'm going to right-click on this, right-click, and I'm going to say I want to debug this as a batch job. That means basically just submit this job to batch, and when it gets submitted to batch, just use my default job description, whatever it happens to be. So in this case, it's going to go to QBatch. So I will click on that. It's going to go to batch. It should wake up the debugger, which it just did, and now it's prepared. I'm in debug mode. I'm ready to start debugging that program. But I'm going to not debug that program yet. I'm going to go back to the RSE again. And here, I'm going to now come to this program, enc debug m, which is kind of like this program, but this one requires now a parameter. And this requires a one-letter parameter, letter E or D, and because it's an encryption program, I'm going to pass it letter E, which means I want to use the encrypt facility of it. It doesn't really matter what it does, but because I have to pass it a parameter, I can't just say debug as, because then it will get submitted with no parameter. I need to prompt it first. So I'm going to say debug prompt batch, and now I'll bring up my prompt screen right here, and I want to click on now how to start. That will allow me, there's my submit job, as you can see. I'm going to now prompt that. That's going to bring up the prompter, which I just did. Let me drag it over here to the screen. There now is the call to my program. I'm now going to press F4, so I want to prompt that call instruction. It just did again. Let me drag it over here. So here is where I can now type in the parameters. I'm going to type in letter E. It added it over here. Now, because that first program is already running in QBatch, and on this system I'm working on, QBatch is a single-threaded job queue. If I just leave everything alone, the job will not run because it'll be stuck in the job queue. With that in mind, I'm going to come down to job queue here, and I'm going to type in a different job queue name. For this example, because I'm on a development system, I can do this. I'm going to type in QInter. It doesn't matter. That will go to the QInter job queue. Okay, so that's fine. Now I'll come here and say OK. Now I'll say debug. You can see here's my whole debug, my submit job. There's my parameter right there. Job queue, QInter. Debug will submit that job to QInter job queue. Here we go. It's now getting submitted. And what just happened is the following. This is really important. When you want to debug more than one program at the same time, this debug view, the debug view and the debug perspective becomes very important because this is where I navigate between my two source members and my two active programs. Because I now have two call stats. I have two active jobs here, two separate active jobs with their own job number and everything else. So if I want to bring up that other program, I'll just click on it over here. Now I have the source member up, and I can go back and forth. I can put these side by side if I want. I can drag them. For example, I can do that. I can do whatever I want with this. Now I'm only on one screen here, so this is not very helpful. Obviously, if I had multiple monitors, I would typically drag this debug view to a second monitor and give myself a full wide screen here. But here's the way this works. I have two programs now debugging it at a time. Which one is active right now? I control that by clicking on the program in the call stack. So right now, if I press F6 to step, I'm in program ENC debug. So I'm going to press F6 right now, and this program, sure enough, ENC debug is the one that actually executed a line of code. F6 again. Okay, it just read a record. Now if I want to debug this program over here, I just come back to my call stack, click on it over here. That now gives this window focus. When I press F6 again, now that's the one that gets debugged. This is somewhat counterintuitive. You would think, and I would have liked, but this is not the case, I would love to just be able to click in this view and give it focus. That's not the case. You must select from the call stack. If I click on this guy again, now let's give this window focus again, F6 again, and notice when I did that, notice what it did. The variable view even here lit up because it gave this program focus. It gave me this program's variables. When I come over here, they're still empty. I haven't read any records yet. So that's why they're blank over here. So I'll come over here again, F6, and now I can keep doing that. So that's how you debug multiple programs. There's really no limit to how many you can debug at one time. And this is a story I tell all the time, I've actually had to once debug two programs that were actually communicating with each other via a data queue. And I found it to be very helpful to debug both of those active programs while they were running. And I actually saw the data going back and forth in the data queue. And it was very, very helpful to debug what was going on in those two programs. I can easily now debug, if I chose to, an active running job. I can debug an interactive job. It would just keep bringing up more views, and I would just have more entries in the call stack, and I would just keep clicking on them to give each window focus. So that's how to debug multiple programs at one time, multiple jobs, multiple partitions. However you want to do it, you can do that. Far superior to the green screen debugger, far superior. All right, let's move on. The final collection of hidden gems is not even part of RDi itself, but part of a plugin that's designed for RDi. It's a completely free plugin. It's called iSphere, and if you're not using iSphere, you need to explore this because there are a lot of features in here that really extend the use of RDi. Here is the website where you can go to actually get iSphere. There's the link over there, written by SourceForge, Task Force IT Consulting. You see it right there. Supplied by these great developers, Frank Hildebrandt and Thomas Radatz, and there are some supporting developers as well who do translation, as you can see there. But there are a lot of nice tools. Now, I will tell you this: some of the things that iSphere has, when they were first introduced to iSphere, RDi did not have. However, RDi has caught up in some cases. For example, iSphere for a very long time did have the compare source members with the merge left and right. Now RDi has it natively, so I go to that one first. But one of the nice features that I love about iSphere, which I want to show you, are the two explorers. The job log explorer is the first one. So I can take any active job in RDi. I can go to the jobs subsystem on the RSE tree, open it up, as my screenshot over here has. And in this case over here, I open up QInter, and because I have in this screen, in this version of RDi, not this version, in this load of RDi, I happen to have iSphere loaded. So I took a screenshot of it. When you right click and when you have when you have iSphere loaded, you get additional menu options. So you can see over here, here's the job over here. I right-clicked and I have this new feature here called Job Log Explorer. So I clicked on that, and this pops up. What this does is it reads the active job log, and it gives me in living color all of the different steps that occurred in that job log, which is really phenomenal. I can then filter out by different IDs. So think about it. If you're trying to debug something, for example, and you're trying to find a particular ID or a particular library or a particular program or statement, whatever the case is, you can filter on those, and then just those will appear in this filtered view over here. You can then click on this and get more information over here, just like this over here. This, for the price, which is completely free, for the price, I can't think of a better way to look at a job log. There's the filter view again. Once you type in your filter, you say apply filters, and then the screen gets refreshed with your filters in place. In addition to looking at an active job, this has a very nice feature where if you happen to have a job log spool file, you can then go to the spool files themselves. You can right click on the spool file, and the same thing will appear. Job Log Explorer will appear. It will then read the job log from the spool file and give it that same graphical view. So if a program has already completed, you can then look at the job log in this new graphical way and really get a great opportunity to dig into the job log in a much more meaningful way. The second thing that I love about iSphere is this new thing called Journal Explorer, or Journal Viewer. And what this is, the way this works is you can take any journal, database journal. Now this viewer it doesn't read the journal directly. It requires that you output the journal or portions of the journal to an out file. So that's what I did over here. I have this file called, I'm journaling this with this journal called CustJourn, as you can see over here. And you can see here that I'm pulling out the entries for customer master, custmast, and then I've created this file. I created this out file called CustJourn dump, and there it is right over here. I then opened up iSphere again, went to that file, right-clicked and said open up the journal. This screen popped up, and what I get on the next screen is nothing short of magic. I get a graphical way to view the journal entries. Now again, I'm not reading the live journal, I'm reading a file of the journal entries, but that's okay because it gives me a great way to dig in and interrogate what's in that journal. Here's the viewer, and if I dig in, it gives me much more information about the actual fields. You can see them right there. Here are the fields that are in that journal entry. This is a phenomenal tool. The price is unbelievable, free. Download it. I really think you should take a gander at this. It's really worth your time. I also like this feature. This is the SQL feature where you can actually select via SQL different entries in your out file based on different codes. So for example, over here, I entered SQL. I said where the journal entry type equals UP, which is obviously update, and this window then got populated based on my SQL request update. And these are all the different things you can do with the Journal Explorer. You can see there's quite a few things in there. So is it a hidden gem? Well, it's not hidden in RDi, but it's maybe hidden to you that you don't know about iSphere. Check out iSphere. There's a lot of useful tools in there. Some I think are more useful than others. These two things are fairly new, and these are really worth your time. So that's it. We covered a lot of different hidden gems in RDi. There are so many more, really so many more. Go out to YouTube, look for different things in RDi. There's a lot of videos out there that you can look at, you can watch. RDi, if you're not using it, I still boggles my mind that people are not using RDi, but they're not, and they're missing out on so much. Anyway, this was the Hidden Gems of RDi. I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you for joining me. It's always a pleasure. And as I always say, I'm looking forward to seeing you down the road. Bye now.